Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name's Steve Marshall. I'm the UK Group CISO for Bytes, and I'm here today to welcome you to this webinar, and also to act as a host for today. The idea today, as you can see from the webinar, is threat intelligence from academic to actionable. If you have any questions during this process about what the panelists are saying, or anything relevant to ask, please put it in the chat window, and that will be passed over to me, and I'll ask the questions of the panel that I have with me today. Please make sure the questions are as horrible and as nasty as you can, and things you want to know, and I'll be more than happy to ask them of the audience. Usual health and safety stuff. Social distancing is in place as we're all in different locations. Face coverings have been used where appropriate, and we've stuck a paper bag over Chris's head, which people suggest is probably a good thing, and you'll see why when he joins us later. SOC's been thoroughly and regularly sanitized, and we recommend that you use antivirus as well for all computer systems, just to be on the safe side. On a more serious note, a cyber attack is launched somewhere globally around every 14 seconds. And the if has become the when, and now has really become the how bad when it comes to a breach. It was Charles F. Kettering that said, action without intelligence is a form of insanity, but intelligence without action is the greatest form of stupidity in the world. And really, when you think about it, it's very true. And when we think about threat intelligence, we usually think about technical data feeds that provide URLs, IPs, hash values to search for in log files. We probably also think about, dark web and deep web monitoring, because it kind of sounds cool, and we may not have been there. We may also think about nation states, organized crime groups, stated lone wolf hacker sat in a bedroom in a hoodie. You probably also think that all of this is somewhat of an academic exercise, and there are lots of sad old people with beards. Well, that kind of describes James and I, that look through log files and honeypots on the internet in order to find stuff that really has no value to you. Either that, or you think this looks more like CSI Cyber, and that we've got glass screens and we can solve any issue within about 40 minutes, including a few ad breaks so we can grab a coffee. The reality, though, is somewhere in between. Nilesh, if you can give me the next slide, please. So what do we kind of mean by threat intelligence? That it really depends on who gives you the definition. And this is what we're going to talk about today, is we're not going to talk about necessarily URLs, IPs, hash values that people are searching for. What we're actually going to talk about is beyond that. We're going to talk about the new threat intelligence that gives you lots more intelligence. Things around exploitable vulnerabilities on your public-facing infrastructure, weak or expiring certificates, open ports, misconfigured services, open file stores, exposed access keys, exposed credentials, exposed commercial, marked or technical documents, unauthorized code commits to public repositories. What's on the surface web? Things like Pastebin or GitHub. Do you have people impersonating your domains or your company profiles? Who's actually typo squatting you? And these types of things that really give you much more actionable information that you can deal with. So without further hesitation, it gives me great pleasure in introducing my guests today that are with me. I've got Chris Cheney, who is SecurityHQ's SOC director. Again, he's an absolute legend within the SOC world. And if you want to discuss the merits of cotton socks, Chris is your man. I've got Nilesh from SecurityHQ with me. Nilesh leads the team for the threat intelligence team at SecurityHQ. Absolute legend when it comes to turning the academic work into work for the rest of us that we actually then have to go and fix. And lastly, but by no means least, I've got James Chappell. James is Digital Shadows founder, and Chief Innovation Officer. He's been around the threat intelligence industry for an exceptionally long time. He really is the night vision goggles of the dark web. But what I can also tell you about James is he does like a holiday cottage with his family for a week. And what I'll do now is I'll pass over to Nilesh to start the presentation.
Thanks, Stu, and hello everybody. My name is Nilesh. Now that Stu has set the context for threat intelligence and how it can be smartly utilized to not only get not only relying on only the IOCs, but going beyond that, and also how we can turn around to take remedial actions quickly. So today we will be talking about 4 key use cases of threat intelligence, starting with data leakage, online brand protection, how your organization's brand, which is your company name, logos, or even some of the key documents or can be identified, detected, and you take proactive actions around that. Attack surface reduction. That's something which all the CISOs worry all the time. Despite of doing all the pen testing and red team activities, which are point-in-time activity, you really need to know what is your attack surface and if something is exposed on the internet in real time. Lastly, the dark web. You must have heard stories about the employee data as well as credentials. All this information getting leaked out in dark web, but then you need to monitor them and take proactive actions. So I will also request James, as we move through all these use cases, we will discuss what is covered in these use cases, and then how we have, how we are helping our clients to take proactive actions quickly for the incidents that we identify. So James, if you can help us understand, how data leakage incidents are detected, what are the key ones that we monitor in your Digital Shadows platform.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nilesh, and thank you, Steve, for that introduction. I've certainly been shining my night vision goggles before we start this. So, brilliant. So, look, I think this is really interesting. Steve, in your introduction there, I think it was very important to point out that although information security itself is a fairly nascent topic, threat intelligence itself is sort of even younger. So it's been probably really been talked about seriously for about the last 10 to 12 years. It's really quite early in its formation, but because of that, there's been a lot of confusion. And I think the real opportunity here is to provide information with context that prevents a bad thing from happening. And for me, that's the basis of all intelligence. It's the preventing the bad thing from happening, which is the key part. In the case of data loss, as we look here, I think unless you've sort of set out some sort of really interesting use cases here. So I'm a big fan of all businesses making use of new technology. That's going to add a lot of benefits. It's especially at the moment, using digital technology is transforming the way we do business, and it's actually creating whole new economies that didn't exist before. So you want to have that digital footprint. At the same time, there's the digital shadow, if you will, the risks online associated with exposed data. So you've got some examples of exposed data here. And you can quite easily illustrate this kind of thing for yourself. So you can go onto something like Google, for example, and you can type into Google, not for distribution, file type : PDF, and you will find about 80,000 PDF documents that are just indexed by a regular search engine. And a good chunk of them contain information that really shouldn't be out there. And a lot of that is happening because quite often of accident and misadventure. So these are sort of unintentional consequences of using technologies that don't properly secure data. And this could include things like payment cards, it could be documents, it could be credentials, or something we do a lot of is looking at how organizations that develop code inadvertently leak really sensitive things into some of these shared code repositories that are online. So we've got a few different examples here. The point is, though, is that when you detect this, you need to take some kind of action, either to remove that information or to stop it from continuing, or you need to take some kind of action to reset some credentials and limit the exposure as a result of this. So I think, unless you've got an example of that, how that would look from a security operations standpoint.
Absolutely, James. So I'll just quickly cover, how we are currently handling the exposed credentials. So just to give an example, so we a few days back we raised an incident for exposed credentials to one of our customer, where we identified that there were close to around 10 user accounts whose data was exposed on one of the dark website. And the data was about the credentials, which and in this case, the users were using the corporate email accounts, and it also has the passwords which were released as an alert on Digital Shadows platform. When our analyst did a search for thoroughly analyzing, we realized that the passwords were in a readable format. It was not hashed. That means everybody has access to those passwords, right? So the immediate information, we pass it on to the client, ask them to change the passwords, and also monitor those users for any suspicious activities in the future. Okay. How it flows down into our SOC is we keep track of alerts which is coming out from Digital Shadows, which goes into our QRadar platform for real-time alerting. The most important part is what we do with those alerts. One is definitely a part of adding more context to the alert that has come. So in this case, from which ID it came, what are the user accounts, emails which were exposed. Because we also have access to our customers. If it's MDR customers, we get more contextualization in terms of their user IDs. That helps us to even go and add those user IDs and even go and block those user IDs in Active Directory. So what the team does is while it is going through the contextualization, all these alerts will get recorded. Incident will be raised to the client. The most important part is what we do after that, because as soon as the alert goes to the client, we need to take remedial actions, right? So depending on the agreed SOP with our customers, what we do is we immediately add those user accounts to the high risk users, so that we know that we keep monitoring those user accounts for any suspicious activities. At the same time, now that this is the email account which has been compromised and could again be used for logging into. So we can even go to the level of automating by putting those users in a separate group and increasing the level of the aggressiveness with which any incoming emails are coming for this particular user. At the same time, depending on the severity, if the analyst realize that it has to be raised as a critical one, because these are recently exposed credentials. Say, for example, like you all know, like Nitro PDF has been data leakages have happened in Nitro software. So everybody who is using Nitro PDF, all their corporate accounts, if they are using corporate user IDs, and yes, they would be, because that was a commercial software. And if they are using the same passwords for their login email account, which is the case that we have seen on almost all the cases, that users tend to use the same passwords both for corporate accounts as well as their personal accounts also. So in this case, if it's raised as a critical one, we also have the ability to go ahead and even block those users on the Active Directory, block the users, or even reset their passwords immediately, and then send an email to those users that they have to reset their passwords because they had been identified that the credential leakage has happened for their user account. So this is the flow that happens in the background, and as you say, it's not only limited to alerting to the customers, but actually taking remedial actions quickly.
That's the important thing, isn't it? Here, that's the important thing, isn't it? Here, Nash. So you're taking an alert based on the configuration that we put into Digital Shadows around the customer's domain, and quickly when we find something, you can take immediate action. These things can take minutes to perform and to increase or mitigate mitigate the risk, decrease the situation, de-escalate the situation, and actually take action. Without that, it's kind of academic. Understanding that credentials out there, you can't do anything about that. That paste site, it's out there, it's on the dark web or on the public site. It's difficult to get that stuff taken down, but you can take action.
In terms of scale here, it's around 20 billion credentials that we see at the moment sort of shared online. So there's only 7 billion people on the planet. So that means, and the reason there's so many of these credentials out there is that if you think about the average number of web accounts held by a human being is about 197. And if you think the rate and frequency with which these password breaches take place now means that there's at least 2 or 3 sites for any one sort of usual user of the internet at any one time has those passwords exposed. So if you didn't believe in password hygiene before this, definitely have different passwords for different resources is a really good strategy for defending against this kind of threat.
Yeah.
James, can you also talk about online brand protection? What do we cover there?
I guess, yeah. So from an online brand protection perspective, I think one of the things we've observed is that threats and threat actors are trying to manipulate the identity of organizations and individuals to try and insert themselves between a legitimate organization and either their customer or the people that they have to establish trust with. And you can see them doing that in a number of ways. Probably one of the most frequent ways that we see this taking place is in domains. And if you think about, a few years ago, we had businesses were able to sort of pre-register their space on the internet in the domain name space, and they were able to prevent people from impersonating them by sort of occupying that space. And that's all really changed in the last 3 or 4 years for a few reasons. One of which is that the top level domain space now has thousands upon thousands of different variations. So there's a concept of generic TLDs. If you're into domains, these are the concept of having another word other than .com or .uk on the end of your domain. Just because there's now thousands of permutations, it's no longer possible to occupy your space on the internet. So the only realistic response to this is to monitor and keep an eye on what's being registered around your brand, and to look at how that's being manipulated online. And you see some really clever things in this space. You see people trying to use things like homoglyphs. So this is where you've taken Cyrillic or some non-Roman character set to replace genuine letters in a domain. So it appears, when it appears on the screen, it looks legitimate, but actually it's sort of a O from a Cyrillic character set. I think there's some really good examples of letter substitution. So the letters R and N to represent looks visually identical to an M, for example. And also sort of this idea of hyphenation, so combo squatting. So this concept of adding an additional domain after a hyphen. So having a domain with the hyphen services after it, a lot of people wouldn't sort of look at that too closely and would accept it as being a legitimate domain. So the real opportunity here is to try and keep ahead of that by looking at how that space is changing over time, and then being able to take real action off the back of it. So the minute you see a change, being able to take an action and stop bad things from happening.
Yeah. And those domains, James, they're going to be used against yourself, and they're also going to potentially be used against your customers and supply chain as well. So, taking action against yourself is one thing. How would you advise, if you see some sort of typo squatting domain out there that could potentially be used against your customers or your partners, your suppliers and supply chains? How do you recommend to deal with that? I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Chris. So I think some of the interesting challenges there are, making sure that once you've spotted it, you track its behavior over time. There's usually a series of steps that sites go through. So there's two reasons why those might be set up for customers. So one of those is to either act as a sort of sender of emails to your customer base. So keep an eye out for things like MX records being set up and trying to get examples of any fraudulent emails sent from it, because the minute you have those, you can look at taking abuse or takedown actions off the back of it. The other one to watch out for is sort of websites being built that emulate the brand or identity of the legitimate business. And again, there's some great tools in the tool chest, both in terms of reporting those sites to fraud lists and abuse lists, but also actually, again, performing takedown actions and actually removing that content from the internet. And then also, you may also find your employees are the target of this too. So you need to sort of take action to stop your employees from inadvertently giving away sensitive information to these resources on the internet too.
Absolutely. And I think that's the use case you're going to look at now, Nilesh, isn't it? How you can defend yourself against these impersonations.
Yeah. So we'll quickly talk about impersonating domains. As you can see from the screen here, somebody has registered RN Microsoft, which looks like Microsoft, and it was Steve who has created it for doing phishing attack simulations or maybe red team activities. Okay, but the point here is to show you that, okay, even if this one particular domain is registered, how easy it is to just purchase the domains which looks almost similar to the domain that you are targeting. So that is the modus operandi which is used by an attacker to create domains which almost look like the target domain. And then what we've also seen for a few of our customers is that the attacker will not only create one type of squatting account. So okay, he will keep creating accounts. What we have seen is that after every alternate days or after every 2 or 3 days, he will keep creating those accounts, multiple domains, so that when he launched this attack, if somebody is identifying one or two email as a phishing emails, they will only block those domain IDs, but then others will will skip through and will reach their victims. Okay. So the point here is, even if you can see that the cost of purchasing those domains is just peanut, right? Considering the damage it can cause once somebody is phished using those domains. So just to give a walkthrough how such alerts are handled by our team. So as soon as the alerts gets raised, it goes to our automation platform, which is a SOAR platform. This is where we do a contextualization. So based on the domain, we identify what is the IP address. Now, this is something that we have done. Along with that IP address, we are also adding the subdomain, subnetwork of those IP address, so that if somebody is hosting, and that's a natural tendency that you will host another domain into our IP address, which is very close to the one from where you're launching the phishing attack. So we will add the entire subnetwork there in the automation. So this with this data will also get added into the watch list in our platform. At the same time, this domain will also be automated to be blocked on your internet proxy, to your firewall also, and also to your email gateway. In this case, we are just showing in the Mimecast, but it could be Office 365 or Exchange Online or any other email gateway. So this is how we are handling alerts for impersonating domain. These are very common that we have seen so far. And what we are also saying is that this leads to the credential harvesting attacks, which we have seen for a few of our customers. Yeah.
So just on that, Nilesh, obviously I know you mentioned Mimecast there, but that could be replaced with any particular email gateway out there, Proofpoint, ForcePoint, Zscaler, whatever the case may be. They've all got API extensibility to be able to push that and take that response really quickly. And these are these indicators that you'll find on newly registered domains that are impersonating your own organization. It's all very timely. It's expect that it will happen. It will happen on the same day. So it's not that you can be waiting around for days and weeks to implement a formal change control process to go ahead and block those domains. Deal with it next week, because the attack would have happened by then. So the timely nature of this is absolutely essential. You've got to be able to detect, investigate, respond, contain, all within minutes and hours.
That's right. Because response time is important for an attacker. It's buying a domain and spinning off a website, or creating an email account with that domain is the easiest thing that you will be doing.
So I have a question that's come in from the audience, and the question is: are there any particular times in a company's life cycle that you see domains being registered or misused against an organization more than at any other time?
I can take this one quickly, Steve. We see this quite often happen around new product launches, or when businesses are about to start on a new capability or a new service. Probably the most active I've ever seen in this space is in the cryptocurrency space, where you've got the launch of a new currency or the launch of a new stock or some kind of investment object. It's basically guaranteed these days you're going to get a whole bunch of squatting around that, both in terms of people trying to impersonate the legitimate company over email and trying to divert funds from interested investors, all the way through to people just simply trying to confuse investors as to which resource to register their funds or their interest in, and to hijack the conversation. So yeah, new product launches are definitely the number one that I've seen, but there's plenty of other examples. So anywhere where you see high value transactions taking place is like honey to fraudsters, and again, that's you're going to see a lot of activity around those types of things.
So mergers, acquisitions, IPOs as well, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even sometimes there are some advertisement campaigns which organizations are running. So along with those advertisement campaigns, they will also be sending out emails. So there will be a lot of digital activities. That's also the time the attackers will use those.
Obviously, other events like time of year, Christmas, Easter, public holidays, summer holidays, particular timely events are often related as well.
Yeah, so we're coming up to
retail space.
Yeah, we're coming up to November 27th, Black Friday. So retailers right now, this is a prime time of year. Some of those retailers make nearly half their profit just in 2 days of the year. With sort of Black Friday and sort of Cyber Monday, as we've come to know them. And again, we've seen a lot of activity, in particular in the retail space, in this area.
Yeah, one of the tricks that we often advise our customers who have proxy is to explicitly block all uncategorized websites, because a lot of these impersonating domains will have no formal classification with any proxy because they're new. So this can be a quick remedial action that you can do today, just to be proactive against these.
Yeah, that's a very important point, Chris. In addition to that, all these email gateways nowadays, they will also block the newly created domains. So that's the additional check which they are doing. But what we've also seen is that the attackers will be using the domains which were registered quite some time ago, and they are now available for resale. So that it bypasses the check for newly created domains.
We also see slumber as well for some time, Nilesh. So yeah, we've seen sort of preemptively registered, then not used. So they sort of drop off the security monitoring radar, and then they sort of come alive at a later point. So definitely got to keep an eye on these, even if they've not active at the time that you first see them.
Yeah, cool. I've had another question come in that says, hi, any thoughts on website cloning and options for takedown here?
There's certainly a lot of tools available to attackers to conduct the cloning operations themselves. I mean, to the point where you can't, you know, as a consumer, you really can't tell the difference. It used to be that you could cast a cynical eye looking for sort of spelling mistakes and you know, inconsistencies, and then use your sort of inner spidey sense to sort of figure out whether something was legit or not. But I think these days there are now so many tools available that create pure carbon copies of resources that you've got to assume that the sites themselves will look almost identical to the original. Right down to even the sort of the original code that was used on them. So there's a couple of opportunities that gives. So one of them is to track the image assets off of your original site. That's a useful thing to do, because sometimes that can reveal sites that are interesting to you. I think the other thing to do, so if they're using your brand, or you know, my advice to any business is register your trademarks, make sure you've got good intellectual property registered, because when it comes to using actions like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act or the Nominet dispute resolution processes, being able to evidence those trademarks is really important and quite powerful in terms of getting that content removed. It's not, you still need to take, you know, the operational actions as well, but if you're going to get the content removed, you need to be able to use those trademarks effectively. I think the other thing to do is try and find evidence of abuse. That's incredibly useful when it comes to influencing web hosts and ISPs to also block this stuff. So again, you know, gather as much evidence as you can, because that's really what's going to help you in the long run. And you know, you've got to take some short-term actions, both on your employees from a remediation perspective, such as the examples we see here, but you also need to get things registered with some of the services as quickly as possible to try and stop the extent of the effect.
Yeah, and just to top it up, yes, we do provide takedown service as well. So as part of this deliverables, takedown is something that we offer out of box, which is based on the best effort basis. But if you want to go for the commercial one, that is also possible, that we also have. And to detect those domains, websites which has been, you know, copied one. So the way we detect is through logos. Okay, some of the key, some of the slogans which we will be registering when we onboard the client. So based on these 2 or 3 informations, we will be able to identify if somebody has spin off the website which look like our customer website.
Cool. I suppose one of the other things that pops out of this as well, you know, in terms of this, you know, the question around website cloning, clearly there are also proactive means that you can take. So, you know, the likes of the CDN and cache providers, so the likes of Akamai, Cloudflare, and these types of guys have new services now that have come out that stop things like cloning, or are designed to at least help with cloning. So they stop people scraping data in automated fashions off of the, you know, off of what's been displayed, because generally, if you cache the site, what it does is it renders the page and then delivers a rendered page, rather than, you know, necessarily exposing the code for that site. But also there are other things that you can do. You can stop things like, you know, using these CDN providers, you can stop download of individual images and those types of things. Now, clearly, that doesn't stop somebody coming along and using, you know, photographic software and clipping the image out, or any that have been exposed via Google prior to you putting these technologies in place. But those are also, you know, scrape protection and image protection and those types of things are available as services with particular technology sets, and they're also worth looking at from a proactive standpoint. So I think we've covered that question off. So what I'll do is I'll hand back over to the panelists now to crack on with the attack surface reduction. Yeah.
So before moving there, Steve, I just want to highlight that what we are seeing on the ground is more than cloning of website. It's impersonation of mobile apps, which is very common nowadays, and it looks like that is a lower hanging fruit for the attackers also. So more than cloning of websites, they will be doing you know, mobile apps impersonation a lot.
Yeah, because the mobile app store itself lends an air of legitimacy around that, so it's particularly dangerous. All right, let's move on.
Yep. Okay, James, you want to talk about attack surface reductions? What do we cover here?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nilesh. So I guess a lot of security practitioners will be familiar with the concept of vulnerability management and trying to ensure that any either internet-facing or internal services have their vulnerabilities proactively managed. And I think it's fair to say it's probably one of the first things that practitioners of information security or cybersecurity do in any sort of information assurance program is to look at this area. But I think what's interesting is one thing I've consistently found across having worked in enterprises in information security over the last 20 years or so is that nobody really knows where all their assets are. And actually, as our supply chains extend, you know, we have this old castle walls mentality historically, where, you know, we used to have every bit of information we owned sat on a bit of tin that we owned within our networks. Clearly, that's with digital transformation, that's completely changed now, and we've got third parties that are hosting things that have our brand or are acting on our behalf as an organization out there. And you know, they're enabling really amazing ways of doing business, but they form part of the digital footprint of that organization. And one of the things we've noted is that you need to sort of take in an attacker's eye view. You need to be able to discover your infrastructure using the same techniques an attacker would do. And by doing that sort of hostile reconnaissance approach, you can often discover new assets that you need to include in that vulnerability management program. So I think it's really healthy to throw off the shackles of organizational silos and you know, try not to think from your own perspective as a security practitioner, but think from the perspective of an attacker, and think about, you know, what would an attacker do if they found this resource and where would they go next. So I guess sort of some of the use cases we look at here, so trying to discover weak certificates, exposed ports, you know, certificates that are in various states of maturity, is really worth doing, because they act like big signposts to an attacker. They're the things that an attacker is most likely to exploit, especially if they think it's a resource that's not particularly well maintained. That usually is a sort of a presents a good opportunity to someone trying to exploit an organization.
James, I think what's quite interesting here is that with the tooling, and it's fairly basic tooling that any of your adversaries might have, they could potentially acquire information on your attack surface and you know, what's exposed and what's weak relatively quickly, and would know more about your public-facing assets than most organizations know about themselves. And you know, the tooling is out there, available, very easy to use and easy to acquire. And a lot of it's just open source stuff. Even things like Showdown, for example, you know, that anyone can go on today and enumerate. So I find it quite ironic that an attacker in minutes might know more about a footprint of an organization than the organization knows itself.
Absolutely, yes. It's one of the reasons I got into all of this was the concept of OSINT and how it plays a role, and a lot of that's focused on infrastructure, so the tools here are really mature.
Yeah. Nilesh, take us through how we'd actually use that in practice.
Yeah, I'll take you through about how we handle vulnerable services alert when we discover for our customers. So once it is discovered, we don't only rely on the alert, but the analyst will actually go and verify that alert to really understand what level of vulnerability exposure exists. As soon as that is confirmed based on the SOP, we will add those vulnerable services assets to the high risk asset list, because manually it's not possible to immediately go and shut down that service, right? So while the client is working on either taking down that service or blocking that service or putting some patches, we need to constantly monitor them for any suspicious activities coming out from those vulnerable machines. Okay. At the same time, we have also been raising the service request to the client to ensure that this vulnerable service is blocked. Okay. Let me also quickly talk about one of the alert that was incident that was raised to our customer. This is the customer who has good budget for security. They are a dedicated team. Monthly vulnerability scans from inside, even from outside definitely, and even quarterly pen test. Despite of that, one fine day we got an alert that port 21 was open on one of their IP address, and the threat intel analyst immediately tried to connect to that IP address, and yes, the port 23 and 21 telnet port was open. We immediately come to know that after doing the footprinting that it belongs to one of the network device. And the analyst also checked what are the default user accounts used for those for that network device. And yes, he was absolutely lucky and shocked to find that it was using the default credentials admin and admin. So immediately this alert was raised to the client. We also called him, and the client has immediately took proactive actions. Yeah, so this is how we handle this vulnerable service threat alerts.
Okay. Nilesh, just adding in another recent incident that I worked on personally, where a customer was standing up a remote access portal using a platform called Parallels recently, and it was in a sort of dev stage where it was being built. The customer had inadvertently 22 and SSH out to the internet without really knowing that they'd done that. It was an unauthorized firewall change, and they were unaware of that. That system then became compromised because it was full of default credentials. Ransomware was deployed onto that. Unfortunately, some of their other security controls was able to detect that, but it could have gone so badly wrong because they weren't really aware that it opened that port and that service was vulnerable. So I think that this happens all of the time. What we also see is, and some of the data such as the Verizon data breach report emphasizes that what is an upward trend is that errors are contributing more and more as a percentage to data breaches, and most of those errors are misconfigurations, and human error will happen. Our environments are continuously changing. They're growing and exponential rate at the moment as new services being stood up to deal with new methods of working, and this will happen. Human errors will happen. So unless you're monitoring for those services that are being exposed and those services that are vulnerable, or where there's mismanagement or expired certificates, then it's just an open door. And this is one of the things out of this whole piece here is absolutely controllable. You can control your attack surface. You can't necessarily control an external threat actor targeting against you. That's out of your control. But what you can control is your attack surface.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on to dark web. James, you want to cover this one?
It's an interesting topic. So the term dark web can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. I guess just want to be really clear here. What I'm interested in when I talk about this is getting context and information from sites that are frequented by threats that threaten threat actors. So I'm a big fan of anonymity. I'm a big fan of privacy. That's all does some really important things for society as a whole. Unfortunately, those that wish harm on organizations also benefit from some of that privacy and anonymity. And if you look at sort of the way that threats use this, these types of service, if you look at, for example, we talked about ransomware in the last example there, the big element of ransomware attacks now is there's a sort of PR side to it. So as Chris was mentioning, leading services like RDP, open to the internet, might lead to an infection of a device. The actor, someone like eGregor, for example, sort of recent variant of one of the ransomware families, it will go onto the device, it will sort of enumerate all the files on it. It will, the old style of ransomware was it would just lock up the files, and then you'd have to pay some money to someone to get the unlock key, and they profit, you get your files back, and it was sort of a deal. But things have got a lot nastier recently in that not only do your files get locked up, but also they are sort of siphoned off to the attacker's computers, who then publish them over time, and they'll publish more and more data until the victim sort of pays up. And this is a really big problem. So there's two reasons why this is important. Obviously, if you're the unfortunate victim of a ransomware attack, being able to keep an eye on the sites where these actors actually publish their leaks tells you something about the status of your current incident. So you definitely want to monitor that if you're unfortunate enough to be a victim of one of those attacks. But actually, really interestingly, the frequency with which these attacks take place now is so much higher than it was, say, 2 years ago. They've really franchised these operations. So now what a lot of our clients do is they're monitoring for their supply chain, looking at how your suppliers are affected by this particular vector, and you can sort of keep an eye on who's being affected where, and you've got a sense of what threats there are to your data and your supply chain by monitoring these types of things. I think the other sort of area here is by looking at the particular types of ransomware and looking at the particular types of exploit kits that you see on these sites, you can also stay one step ahead and learn something about commonly used techniques. So Chris alluded nicely to RDP there. I think 3-4 years ago, RDP really wasn't a sort of exploited in the same way that it is today. And if you're thinking about where you prioritize your security, I think now these days you really want to make sure that stuff was really very well protected, because just leave a vulnerable IP open for more than a few minutes, you will get an infection these days. So yeah, using this, the key here is, I think a lot of people think about threat intelligence like a self-licking ice cream cone. It sort of doesn't have any purpose. It doesn't sort of, you want to actually get a benefit from it. That's the really key part. And for me, the real benefit in analyzing information on sites that criminals tend to use is you get insight into the behavior. And when you get that insight into the behavior, you know how better to align your resources to give you a more effective response and a more effective defense.
Yeah. So, from the SOC side, while we do keep monitoring about any data leakage information or any attack-related information or any ransomware successful attacks against your organization, okay, so that is actively monitored. But at the same time, what we also keep looking and also keep alerting you of all about the TTPs used by the attacker against your against the sector, against our client sector, at the same time region. So if the moment we identify any attacks which is going on targeting that particular sector, your region, we'll immediately add those TTPs. Either it is a case of IOC-based use cases, IOC-based information that will get added into our watch list to immediately block those IP addresses, hashes as well. But the most key part is the use cases based on the the techniques that the attacker is using. Whether he is using specific processes, specific DLL injection attack, or the named pipes. All this will be highlighted. We talking about the egregor malware. So this is. This attack was detected by our SOC. You can say that we, as SHQ Labs, we published this advisory where we also mentioned about the IOCs for the the kind of tactics that the attacker was using. So for this was a very typical case of attacker using named pipes for privilege escalation. That's what we have seen in the past also, along with the other IOCs that we have got.
Yeah. So Nilesh, I remember that one was related to APT 35, which is something which is a bit in the news at the moment, Iranian State Actor Group. And I know there's a lot of information right now on Digital Shadows on Searchlight around that threat actor group. But in that case, they were using a particular relatively new exploit against an OA vulnerability that we were able to pull out the interesting attributes of that into TTPs and get that into a sort of detection mode and get the customer onto a particular more of a proactive footing around this, using those sorts of use cases. I think this is a similar one here that you're trying to show, Nilesh, where you can see here that there was intelligence that we were able to acquire around particular naming conventions for DLL and .bat files associated with egregor ransomware, for example. Now, those DLL files, or the file naming convention, is quite interesting there, and that is intelligence that can be used to be able to identify where you might see these, where the particular ransomware or Trojan malware has evaded your security controls. Yet, if you know that those file naming conventions exist from the intelligence you're able to acquire, you're able to put yourself in a position where you can detect it and respond to that. And if you've got EDR technology, even block that those files from being able to execute proactively. So that's really, I think, where it comes from, being able to say, I've got information about a particular threat actor group that is largely interesting, newsworthy, and maybe a little academic, and turning it into something which is more proactive in terms of being able to detect and respond and push things into tools to be able to block. And really, that's what it's all about, because I think other than that, a lot of this is very interesting, but unless you can make an actionable, it doesn't go beyond that. And that's really what we're trying to do. And there are obviously intelligence services that will give you feeds of hashes and IP addresses, domains. Those things are easily changed and have a shelf life of days or maybe weeks, not more than that. So you've got to get up the food chain in terms of being able to identify really meaningful indicators that you can use based around the behavioral aspects, based around things that are harder to change. I think this is a good example here where you can see that the attacker is trying to mimic Akamai, and with a broad range of Akamai-like domains, not just one, in a single attack. So as Nilesh was mentioning earlier in the slide deck here, you wouldn't expect necessarily just to see one. They would try multiple in the event that your proxy or email gateway might identify one of them, but maybe not all of them. And the number of top-level domains here in this single attack, is many. This page goes on and on and on. So this attacker has invested in these domains. They are cheap, but at scale, that'll add up to a significant investment. He may not change that for some time. So use it, put it into your proxy, your email security gateway, your next generation firewall, your SIM tool, and start monitoring against it and turn it into actionable security intelligence.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Okay, so let me quickly talk about the engine as how this whole.
I think should we allow James to articulate that? I think.
Yeah.
In terms of how Digital Shadows works, where it gets its sources from, how the engine works, in terms of being able to correlate that and alert on that.
Nearly out of time, guys.
So I'll be super quick. So I mean, just from our perspective, looking at that digital footprint, looking at how external sources can be obtained, but then very quickly turned into a small number of highly actionable things is absolutely the key. So we both sort of collect that, but we then analyze it, score it to make it relevant, add context to it, and it's that context in combination with the collected information that then make it highly actionable. And we're really proud to partner with SecurityHQ and Bytes to make that a reality in an operational sense, and very, very proud to work alongside the team here to do that.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead, please.
Just to wrap up here, just in terms of what you get back out of the service, you know, it's 24/7 SOC-based analytics and alerting powered by you know, Digital Shadows. So that real-time, eyes on the glass investigation on the fly as things come in to take responses and actions is absolutely essential. We do a lot of the way in the way of monthly reporting, because this is a board level discussion, and the board needs to know, what is the state of alert that we're at the moment based on all this good information that we get coming into the system. How do we articulate that at a board level to understand, are we more at risk than we were last week or the month before? Where is it trending? Where do we need to focus our efforts and investments and so on? And then the final thing is around the incident response aspect to this. You know, taking action, being able to block bad domains and IPs and URLs and things, absolutely. Taking credentials and being able to take action against them by forcing password resets and increasing the monitoring level of severity on your email security gateway. Those sorts of things are what you can do to take proactive actions, as well as obviously orchestrating takedowns, notices served against impersonation type of issues, brand related issues. So that's what the service delivers. Next slide, please, Nilesh. You know, and really what we're trying to, the challenges that we're addressing here is that, you know, the tooling is amazing. You know, Digital Shadows tooling is very powerful, but what the market really lacks is the skills, the time, the ability to actually take that information, make it useful, and take action. So that's really what we're doing in terms of wrapping up what is already an amazing tool with a managed service through Bytes to be able to give those advantages to the customer and solve those particular challenges. So, Steve, can I hand back over to you to wrap up? I'm sure there might be a few more questions. I know that we're running close to time here.
Yeah, certainly. I haven't got any more questions coming. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to summarize and wrap up. So hopefully, everybody, you found this useful and seen how you can take what seems a very academic exercise and turn it into actionable information that you can really use. As a CISO, I'm tasked with ensuring that the security of an environment. But how do I do that? Well, I can easily take a standard like ISO, do a risk assessment, and then select controls to secure the environment. But what that lacks is context. How do I do the risk assessment accurately when I don't know what my threat landscape is or what I'm working against? How do I justify budget when I don't know if a risk is real or have real evidence to back up my case? I get asked a lot, you know, in boardrooms, am I secure? And I always say, you know, that's kind of the wrong question. What you should be asking me is what's my risk? As James said, threat intelligence is young in terms of information security. However, businesses have been using intelligence for years to drive their operations forwards. Additionally, if you think about it, you know, the police and security services have been using intelligence to lock up bad guys for nearly as long as businesses have been using it to increase their capability. The difference now is that our lives and our businesses are online. So this is a natural progression and one that business leaders may not have realized yet. As most of you know, I'm a big fan of philosophy, and it was Sun Tzu that said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not your enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you neither know the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to my panelists who have joined me today. And finally, if you've enjoyed the webinar, then my name's Steve Marshall. And if you haven't, then my name's James Chappell. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Thanks all.